I was 58 the day my son got married, though I felt at least 10 years older by the time the night was over. My name is Margaret Langley, and I've spent most of my life being the quiet one in every room, the woman who smiled when she was overlooked, who nodded when others spoke over her, who carried the weight so her son could walk lightly. But that night at Daniel's wedding, something inside me shifted. I was seated by the kitchen, not near it, not beside it, but in it. That was where I watched my only child get married through a swinging door behind a tray of shrimp cocktails I had paid for. The room beyond that door glowed like a movie scene, crystal chandeliers, soft golden lights spilling across white linen tables. Every flower in that room was my doing. Every rented chair, every folded napkin, every flute of champagne. I had written those checks myself. And yet when I arrived, no one even met my eyes. There was no name card waiting for me, no warm greeting, no reserved seat at the family table. Just a folding chair in the corner, metal legs, a paper napkin tossed over it like a joke. Someone had rolled a cart with a broken wheel next to it. Every time the servers pushed past, it squeaked in protest. I stood there for a long time before sitting down. The scent of marinara sauce clung to the steam from the kitchen ovens, heavy and sour, wrapping around me like humiliation itself. My back was hot from the ovens, my face cold from the draft that slipped through the door cracks. I looked down at the dress I'd chosen for this day, soft mauve chiffon hand-stitched along the seams. I'd spent 3 hours at the salon that morning, pretending that today would be as special for me as it was for Daniel and his bride Emily. But no one told me what they had planned. No one said we made other arrangements. When I arrived, Daniel barely looked up. He was busy smiling for photos, adjusting his cufflinks, letting Emily's mother kiss his cheek like she'd raised him herself. I stood at the edge of the crowd, invisible, my heart thudding in my chest, like I'd wandered into someone else's dream. I remember clutching my small beige handbag, the one he'd bought me years ago for Mother's Day, when he still called me Mama. My hands were shaking, but I tried to hide it by adjusting the strap again and again. A young catering manager, barely 20, approached me, his smile, brittle eyes darting toward the main hall. Ma'am," he said softly. "They said you're supposed to wait back here." The bride didn't want, um, any visual clashes with the theme. The theme. That word hit harder than any insult could. Through the swinging doors came bursts of laughter and music. Visual clashes, he said again, as if my presence, my body, my face, the woman who birthed the groom, didn't fit their aesthetic. I sat down slowly. The chair creaked under my weight. There was a dark stain on the floor beneath me, something sticky that clung to the soles of my shoes. I folded my hands in my lap and stared at my nails, pale pink, freshly done. Beside me, a server dropped a cold plate of chicken breast onto a chipped white dish. That was my dinner. The worst part wasn't the insult, it was that I didn't say a word. Because it was his day. Because I told myself, don't ruin this for him, Margaret. Because I still believed that paying for everything meant I had a place in it. I pulled out the printed program I'd been handed at the church, elegant cream cardstock with gold lettering. Her father walked her down the aisle. Her mother gave the first speech. My name wasn't anywhere. I was a ghost in a gown. The kitchen doors swung open again. I caught a brief glimpse, chandeliers glimmering, Daniel and Emily twirling under soft gold light. He looked radiant. He didn't glance my way once. I pressed a napkin to my mouth to hide the tremor in my lips, pretending to dab at a non-existent stain. My eyes burned. I told myself it was the onions, the heat, anything but what it truly was, betrayal. But I felt it, that small, sharp crack deep inside, the kind you don't notice until the whole glass shatters. I stared at the peeling paint on the wall in front of me until my vision blurred. I anchored myself to that patch of chipped color, my one solid thing in a world that had suddenly decided I didn't belong. If I moved, if I cried, if I made a sound, I knew I'd never stop. So I didn't. I breathed through it. I smiled for no one, and I waited. Hours passed. Toasts, laughter, music, plates scraped clean. When someone finally brought out the wedding cake, I could smell it through the door, buttercream, sugar, raspberry filling. The bride's favorite. Mine was chocolate, always had been. I didn't taste a bite. But when the night grew quieter, when the lights dimmed just slightly, I reached into my purse and took out my phone. My reflection glimmered faintly on the black screen, calm, hollow, resolved. And with one steady finger, I made 3 short calls. No explanations, no hesitation. The flowers for tomorrow's brunch canceled. The second half of the band's payment withheld. The open bar that was supposed to run until midnight closed early. I spoke calmly, politely. And when I hung up for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt a quiet hum of something I hadn't known in decades. Power. When I looked at my reflection again in the screen, my hands were steady, my breath even. I sat there, the woman they had pushed out of the frame, and realized that maybe, just maybe, I didn't need to be part of their picture anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in that stiff hotel bed, still wearing my dress, the scent of roses and grease tangled in my hair. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slow, half hoping it would fall and end the ache in my chest. I thought about every night I'd worked double shifts, every scraped knee I'd kissed, every letter I'd signed as guarantor for Daniel's future. And now here I was, the unwanted witness to the life I had built for him. When the clock read 3:17 a.m., I sat up. The air felt thin, sharp, clean. I reached for my tablet and opened the wedding budget spreadsheet I'd kept for a year, every line item, every vendor, every indulgence Emily had requested to make things more elevated. Hand-calligraphed invitations, imported flowers, a custom neon sign, every dollar of it mine. And then I saw it, 2 new charges on my card made days before the wedding. A bar tab, a rehearsal dinner upgrade, the same restaurant where they'd seated me near the kitchen. Under one transaction, a note. His mom is covering everything. Might as well go big. Wedding vibes. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. Just that heavy, dense nothing that comes after too much pain when your nerves curl inward to protect themselves. I stood up, walked to the mirror, and barely recognized myself. The woman staring back at me had mascara streaks, tired eyes, and a mouth that no longer knew how to smile. And for the first time, I whispered to that reflection, "You're done being the ghost in their story." Outside, dawn began to bleed into the sky, pale blue, then gold. Something inside me shifted again, not breaking, not shattering this time. Rebuilding. The sun that morning felt cruelly beautiful, too soft, too forgiving for the kind of night I had survived. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in the same mauve dress, the fabric wrinkled and faintly smelling of disappointment. The air conditioning hummed low like a lullaby for the defeated. But I wasn't defeated anymore. I was awake, painfully, vividly awake, in a way I hadn't been for years. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't need to look. I already knew who it was, Daniel. Then Emily. Then my niece. What happened? Everyone's freaking out. Mom, where are you? I stared at the screen until the light dimmed to black again. Let them wonder, let them squirm. I walked to the window, pulled the heavy curtains aside, and watched the city slowly come alive. Cars gliding through streets still glistening from last night's rain, hotel staff, wheeling carts across the parking lot, a world moving forward while I stood in the quiet wreckage of my illusion. It's strange how you can spend decades believing you're indispensable, only to realize one day you were merely useful. I took a long, deliberate breath, then sat at the desk, turned on my lamp, and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, trembling not from fear, but from clarity. Then I began to type. 3 emails, short, polite, unyielding. To the florist. Please cancel the Sunday delivery. Remaining balance withheld. Thank you. To the band. Due to changes in the event schedule, we will not require the second performance. Consider the matter closed. To the bar service, we're scaling back post-reception hours. Please cancel the second shift. I reread each one twice before hitting send. Not to doubt myself, but to savor the precision. For once, I was the one drawing the boundaries. When the final email disappeared into the digital void, I closed my laptop and exhaled. The sound startled me, a raw, shaky breath that came out like a confession. The kind that says I have finally stopped pretending. By the time the sun climbed higher, I'd changed out of the dress and into an old shirt and jeans. I left the hotel room as if walking out of a tomb, quietly without looking back. The lobby clerk smiled, polite and unaware. "Did you enjoy your stay, ma'am?" I smiled too, because it was easier than explaining. It was unforgettable. The drive home was a blur of motion and memory. The radio played songs I didn't recognize, just background noise to my thoughts unspooling like film. He didn't mention me in the program. He didn't look at me once. Her parents toasted to their perfect new son. Every scene replayed in my head until it no longer hurt, just hollowed me out like a house being emptied room by room. When I reached my driveway, the roses I'd planted 2 summers ago were in bloom, bright, defiant red, the color of hearts that keep beating even when they're cracked. I should have felt comfort seeing them. Instead, I felt tired. I walked straight inside, the air heavy with the scent of old candles and faint lavender detergent. Home. My one constant, even if it had never felt like mine entirely. There's a drawer in my bedroom top, right just beneath the mirror. Inside it, a red folder I hadn't touched in years. I pulled it out without even knowing why. Maybe I was searching for proof that my life had meant something more than paying bills and being left behind. The folder was thick with old paperwork, insurance forms, tuition receipts, family photos with corners curling from age. At the bottom, hidden under a stack of documents I hadn't seen since my husband's funeral, was a yellowed envelope. The handwriting on it stopped me cold. Michael, my late husband's name. He'd been gone for over 20 years, a car accident in Arizona. I had never opened this letter before. I'd found it in a box of his belongings, sealed, postmarked weeks before he died. I couldn't bring myself to read it then. I wasn't ready to feel that kind of pain twice. But now I had nothing left to protect. I tore it open. The paper inside was thin, fragile, like it might dissolve if I breathed too hard. His handwriting slanted the way it always had, messy, rushed, human. Margaret, I know you never wanted to hear from me again, but I need to tell you something. I've carried a secret for years and I can't take it with me. Daniel, he isn't biologically yours. My hands went cold. The words blurred. I blinked hard once, twice, until they refocused. Emily was pregnant when we got together. I thought I could pretend he was mine, but he wasn't. Neither of us ever told you. I'm sorry. You deserve to know the truth. The room tilted. I sat back on the bed, letter trembling in my hand. Daniel, my Daniel, was another woman's child. I felt nothing. Not the expected grief or rage, just a stillness so deep it frightened me. Like my heart had folded its arms and said, "That's enough now." I read the rest of the letter, apologies, excuses, words that dissolved on the page like ash. He wrote about guilt, about shame, about wanting to confess before it was too late. He said I was stronger than he ever deserved. And he was right. I had been strong. Too strong, maybe. Strong enough to carry everyone else's weakness until mine became invisible. I set the letter down beside me and stared at the wall. All those years, every scraped knee, every school lunch packed, every double shift worked so Daniel could have braces or sneakers or a class trip. And none of it had been mine by blood, but it had been mine by choice. Every kiss goodnight, every fever soothed, every bedtime story whispered through exhaustion. I had been his mother in all the ways that mattered, and somehow that made the betrayal cut even deeper. Because if love isn't enough to earn you a seat at your own child's wedding, what is? I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a cup of coffee. Black, bitter, perfect. I sat by the window, sunlight spilling over my hands. The world outside looked new, almost untouched. I thought about the woman I'd been for the past 3 decades, caretaker, provider, fixer, and how easy it had been for them to forget that she existed. I took another sip, then reached for my phone. My fingers didn't shake anymore. 3 messages blinked on the screen. Daniel, Mom, what did you do? Emily, this is so childish. Please respond. Susan, her mother. This is incredibly unprofessional. People are asking questions. I smiled. Just a small one, the kind that comes from somewhere between pain and peace. Because for once, they were the ones asking questions. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. I had already said everything I needed to say, not with words, but with silence. That day I cleaned the house slowly, washed the dishes that had waited for me, fed the cat, folded laundry with deliberate care. Every small act felt sacred, like a quiet rebellion. I was reclaiming something they had tried to take, my dignity. When evening came, I lit a candle on the kitchen counter. Vanilla and cedarwood. The flame flickered gently, steady and alive. I sat across from it, the letter open beside me, and whispered to the air, I did everything right, and I'm still the one left behind. But maybe that wasn't the tragedy. Maybe the tragedy was that I'd built my whole life around being chosen when I could have chosen myself. And for the first time, I started to wonder what that might look like. Morning crept in through the blinds, pale gold, indifferent. I sat at the kitchen table, still in the same chair where I'd read Michael's letter hours ago. My coffee had gone cold. The candle had burned itself out. The silence felt too perfect, like the kind that follows an explosion. Daniel's texts had stopped coming. The last one was short, impatient, written the way you speak to someone you've already decided doesn't matter, Mom. I can't believe you'd do this. Everyone's talking about it. You've embarrassed us. Embarrassed us. The irony made me laugh out loud, a dry, humorless sound that startled even me. I had sat alone in a kitchen at his wedding, humiliated in silence, but I had embarrassed him. That was the moment I realized just how far gone he was, how far we were. I turned off the phone and set it face down. Let them all choke on the noise they'd created. That morning I went to the dresser and opened the red folder again, not for the letter this time, but for what lay beneath it. Receipts, invoices, contracts. Each line item was a record of my love made tangible, turned into currency. The dress fittings, the 5-tier cake, the open bar, the custom neon sign that said the future is forever. I flipped through each page, and every total felt like a heartbeat, proof of how much I had given, proof of how easily they had taken. No one had offered to contribute. Not Daniel, not Emily, not her parents with their country club smiles. I had written every check believing love was repayment enough. But love doesn't show up in ledgers. It doesn't sign its name on invoices. Love can't be audited, only used. I stood there for a while, staring at those papers spread across my bed like a confession. Then, without even thinking, I began to organize them into neat little piles: paid, pending, canceled. It was practical at first, almost mechanical, but halfway through I realized what I was really doing. I wasn't managing a budget, I was cataloging my worth. The florist had called while I worked. I let it go to voicemail, then listened later. The woman's voice was kind but careful. "We understand about the cancellation, Mrs. Langley. It's unfortunate. We'll need to keep the deposit, of course." "Fine. Keep it. Keep the flowers that never bloomed for me anyway." By mid-afternoon, I had cleaned every corner of the house, not because it was dirty, but because I needed to reclaim the air. I scrubbed the counters until they smelled of lemon, stripped the bed, washed the pillowcases, vacuumed the carpets twice. When the phone buzzed again, I almost ignored it. But the name flashing on the screen wasn't Daniel's, it was Carol, my sister. I hesitated before answering. She hadn't spoken to me much in years, only showing up when family gossip was good enough to lure her out. "Margaret," she said, her tone soft, but weighted with curiosity. "What on earth happened at the wedding? Everyone's saying you made a scene." "A scene," I repeated. "No, Carol, I made a decision." There was a long pause. I could hear her swallow. "You canceled things?" "Yes." Another pause. "Then good." The words surprised me. For once, she continued, "You did something for yourself. About damn time." We didn't talk long after that, but when I hung up, my chest felt lighter. Maybe not healed, but no longer hollow. Someone, even if it was my sharp-tongued sister, had finally said what I'd been afraid to believe. I hadn't lost control. I had taken it back. That evening, I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat on the porch. The neighborhood was quiet, just the hum of distant traffic, the occasional bark of a dog. The sun dipped behind the trees, staining the sky in soft oranges and blues. I thought about Daniel as a little boy, the way he used to fall asleep on my chest, warm and heavy, his breath soft against my collarbone. He used to call me his safe place, and somewhere along the line I stopped being that. Not because I'd changed, but because he did. Because growing up meant growing away, and in his new world I was a reminder of everything unpolished, unfiltered, unworthy. The ache that came with that thought wasn't sharp anymore. It was dull, steady, like an old bruise you press just to remind yourself it's still there. I slept that night with the window open, letting the cool air wash over me. For the first time in years, I didn't dream about being needed. I dreamed about being free. The next morning, I woke early, before the sun, before the world. I brewed coffee, fed the cat, and opened my Facebook app. The notification icon blinked, dozens of messages waiting, but I didn't open them. Instead, I uploaded a single photo, a blurred image of the check I'd written to the wedding venue, my signature visible, the amount unmistakable. No caption, no explanation, just truth in ink. By noon, the comments had started. Old coworkers, neighbors, friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Most were sympathetic. Some were confused. A few were angry. But one stood out from a woman I barely remembered working with decades ago. "You gave him everything, Margaret. Some lessons are taught by silence, not by words. Thank you for reminding us that mothers aren't infinite." That one made me cry. Not the loud shaking kind, just a single tear that slipped down slow and clean. Because she was right. Mothers aren't infinite. We just pretend to be until someone proves we're not. That night there was a knock on the door. I didn't move at first. It came again, steady, hesitant. I peered through the peephole, a delivery driver holding a bouquet of carnations. Carnations, the cheapest flowers in the grocery store aisle. There was no card, just a plastic wrap beaded with condensation, like even the flowers were sweating from guilt. I stared at them for a long time. Then I opened the door, took the bouquet, and walked straight to the trash bin outside. I didn't throw it angrily. I just let it fall, a quiet drop, a soft thud. That was enough. When I went back inside, I didn't lock the door right away. I stood there looking at my reflection in the hallway mirror. For once, I didn't see the tired woman with lines under her eyes. I saw someone new, someone who had walked through humiliation, betrayal, and silence, and was still standing. And standing alone didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt powerful. The next morning, I woke to another message from Daniel, this time. Longer, more hesitant. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything. Emily says she didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry if you felt excluded. If I felt." Even now, it wasn't about me. It was about his comfort, his guilt, his need to tidy the mess without ever acknowledging who made it. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen until the words blurred, then pressed delete. And as I set the phone down, I whispered something I never thought I'd say out loud: "I forgive you. But I'm done waiting for you to see me." Then I opened the curtains wide, letting sunlight flood the room, warm, golden, unstoppable. The next few days passed like scenes from a movie I didn't remember agreeing to star, in quiet, suspended, almost too still. I cooked meals for one, watered the garden, walked through my house as if learning it all over again, noticing things I had ignored for years. The dent in the hallway from when Daniel crashed his toy truck. The stain on the kitchen tile shaped like a heart from the time he spilled grape juice, and we both laughed until we cried. Every corner of this house had him in it, echoes of his laughter, fragments of my old life, little ghosts of belonging. And yet none of it hurt anymore, not in the same way. Because somewhere between his silence and my decision not to answer, something inside me had shifted for good. The part of me that once lived for his approval, the mother who existed only when needed, was gone. It was strange, the peace that came with that death. Not the peace of forgiveness, no, I wasn't there yet. This was the peace of finality. The moment you realize there is no apology big enough to rebuild what's already turned to dust. I woke one morning to the faint smell of rain drifting through the window. It reminded me of a summer long ago, Daniel's first year of middle school. We'd spent the afternoon running through sprinklers, him barefoot in the yard, laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. When he tripped and scraped his knee, I remember scooping him up, whispering, "It's okay. I'll always be here. I'll always be here." It struck me how often we mothers make promises we shouldn't have to keep, promises that turn into prisons. The rain grew heavier, tapping the glass like a slow, patient metronome. I stood there staring out at the drenched roses and whispered to no one, "You can stop being here now, Margaret. You can go live." It felt strange saying my own name out loud, like calling out to a friend I hadn't seen in years. That evening I made dinner just for me. Not the kind of quick, functional meal I'd thrown together for years, but something beautiful, intentional. Roasted vegetables with thyme, lemon butter pasta, a glass of wine. I lit a single candle and played soft jazz through the small speaker on the counter. For the first time in decades, I sat down and ate slowly. Each bite felt like an act of defiance. Each swallow said, "I am not starving for anyone's love anymore." After dinner, I cleaned up and wandered into the living room. The photos of Daniel and me still covered the walls. Birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings. Smiling faces, both of us frozen in years, where I still believed my love was enough. I studied them for a long time, tracing each glass frame with my fingertips, and then I began to take them down, not out of anger but out of mercy, for both of us. Each photo went into a box lined with old towels. I labeled it Memories Not Obligations. The walls looked bare afterward, but not empty. They looked clean, open, ready. I stood back and whispered, "There. Now there's room for me." The next day, I drove to the small thrift shop downtown. It wasn't much, a tiny place that smelled faintly of dust and cinnamon, but I loved it there. The woman behind the counter, Dina, recognized me from my weekly visits. "You're early today," she said with a smile. "I'm trying to start over," I replied. I bought a blue tablecloth patterned with sunflowers. It wasn't fancy, but it made me smile. It reminded me of something I would have chosen when I was young, before my world shrank to paychecks, recipes, and worry. When I got home, I spread it across the dining table. The fabric caught the afternoon light, soft and golden. For a moment, I imagined people sitting there, my people. Not those bound by blood, but by kindness. And just like that, the idea came to me. I would host a dinner, not for family, not for guilt, for connection, real connection. I wrote out a list on a yellow notepad: Claire, my old coworker from the hospital who used to sneak me coffee when I worked doubles. Mr. Henderson, my neighbor who always shoveled my driveway before I could get to it. Dina from the thrift shop. Janet, a nurse who once stayed late on her birthday so I could get home to Daniel. None of them were relatives, but all of them had seen me, and that was enough. The next few days felt different. I went to the farmer's market early Saturday morning, bought fresh basil, heirloom tomatoes, and garlic. I hummed to myself as I walked home, grocery bags heavy, but my heart light. For the first time in years, I was preparing for something that was mine. The night of the dinner, the house smelled like rosemary and olive oil. Music floated through the air. Van Morrison, then Nora Jones. When the first knock came, I felt a flicker of nerves, but it wasn't fear. It was excitement. Claire arrived first, carrying a bottle of red wine. "You look amazing, Maggie," she said, hugging me tight. I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that feels strange when it first escapes your chest after years of being buried. The others arrived soon after, each one bringing something small: dessert, flowers, stories. The table filled quickly. There was laughter. Glasses clinked. We passed bowls of food and plates of bread, like communion, like forgiveness. At one point, Claire raised her glass. "To Margaret," she said, "for remembering that it's never too late to sit at the head of your own table." Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled, eyes glassy with tears that didn't sting this time. And I realized something: this warmth, this laughter, this was family, not inherited, chosen. Hours passed in conversation. We shared stories of heartbreak and joy, of old jobs and quiet dreams. I caught myself thinking, this is what love feels like when it doesn't demand a sacrifice. When everyone finally left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt full, filled with echoes of joy that lingered long after the door closed. I tidied up, humming under my breath. Then I noticed something small: the box of old photos still sitting in the corner of the living room. I smiled at it. Not with pain, not with longing, just with peace. Then I blew out the last candle and whispered into the quiet. I finally found my place at the table. But peace, as I would learn, rarely lasts long. Because the next morning, there was another knock at the door. Slower this time, steady, hesitant. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Daniel. I stood in the hallway, frozen, staring at the silhouette behind the frosted glass. The shape was unmistakable: tall, familiar shoulders, slightly hunched the way he used to stand when he knew he'd done something wrong. For a long moment, I just watched the outline of my son without moving. The quiet between the knocks stretched like an old scar, healed on the surface but aching deep underneath. When I finally opened the door, the morning light poured in around him, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Daniel looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but reduced. The crisp confidence he'd worn at the wedding had melted away. His hair was messy, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. There were lines on his face I'd never noticed before. He looked like a man who had just started realizing what he'd broken. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. I didn't answer. I simply stepped aside and nodded toward the living room. "Come in." He hesitated, maybe expecting warmth, maybe forgiveness. But there was none of that left in me. I'd given all of it away years ago, and what remained now was something quieter, stronger. He walked past me, his shoes making no sound on the hardwood floor. His eyes flicked around the room, scanning the walls, the furniture, searching for the photos that used to hang there. When he noticed they were gone, his expression faltered. "Where are the pictures?" I didn't answer that either. Instead, I gestured to the armchair across from the couch. "Sit down." He did slowly, like a man stepping into a confessional booth. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Only the sound of the clock ticking from the kitchen broke the silence. Then he exhaled, rubbed his palms against his knees. "I didn't come here to fight." "Good," I said simply. He trailed off, searching for words. "I don't understand what happened. One minute everything was fine, and then the next you're canceling things, posting checks on Facebook, not answering my calls. You embarrassed us, Mom." That last word hung between us, the unity that once included me but now clearly didn't. I stood, walked quietly to the hallway, and returned carrying a small box. I placed it on the coffee table between us. "Open it." He frowned, then lifted the lid. Inside were neatly stacked papers, bound receipts, email printouts, the record of everything I'd paid for. The venue deposit, I said, the band, the flowers, the catering, every single thing that made your wedding sparkle. He glanced up at me, uncertain, maybe even guilty. Then I reached under the box and took out another envelope, old, yellowed, fragile. Michael's handwriting on the front. "This," I said quietly, "is the last thing your father ever wrote to me." He looked confused, then wary. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to read it." He hesitated, then unfolded the letter, his eyes scanning the page. The silence stretched until I thought it might split the air in two. I watched the color drain from his face as he read. When he finally looked up, his voice cracked. "You knew." "I do now." He swallowed hard. "So you're angry because I'm not really your son." I laughed once, sharp, dry, joyless. "No, Daniel. I'm angry because I was your mother. Every day, every year, every sacrifice. And when the moment came for you to stand up and acknowledge that to give me a seat at your table, you let them hide me in the kitchen." He blinked, the weight of it sinking in, but still searching for defense. Emily said, "Stop." My voice cut through the air like glass. "Do not blame her for your silence. You could have said something. You could have looked for me. You could have seen me." He looked down at his hands. The silence between us was heavy, the kind that doesn't ask for words but forces you to feel their absence. When he finally spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't think it would matter." I smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just sadly. "That's exactly the problem." He looked up, his eyes glistening. "I'm sorry, Mom." The word mom hit me differently this time, softer, almost foreign. But I didn't let it undo me. "Do you know what sorry means, Daniel?" I said quietly. "It means nothing without change. I don't want your guilt. I don't even want your apology. I just wanted your respect. Once, just once." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. So I stood, lifted the box of receipts, and held it out to him. "Take it. Every check, every record, every reminder of what you chose to overlook." He didn't move. "Take it," I repeated, this time more softly. "It's yours now." Reluctantly, he stood, took the box from my hands. The weight of it surprised him, maybe not physically, but symbolically. I walked him to the door. He paused at the threshold, the sunlight catching on his wedding ring. "You always said I was your whole world," he murmured. I nodded. "You were," I said. "And now I'm finally mine." He looked like he wanted to say something else, something redemptive, something cinematic, but nothing came. And maybe that was for the best. Some endings deserve silence. When I closed the door, the click of the latch echoed like a punctuation mark. I leaned against it, eyes closed, breathing deeply. And then faintly from the kitchen came the sound of laughter. Not Daniel's, my own. It surprised me, quiet at first, then warmer, fuller. The kind of laugh that feels like breaking free. I walked to the kitchen where the sunlight fell across the sunflower tablecloth. The wine glasses from last night still sat on the counter, catching the light like little jewels. The house smelled like rosemary and lemon and something else, something new. Peace. I picked up a plate of leftover vegetables, carried them to the dining table, and sat down. Not at the end, not off to the side. At the head, the same place I should have sat all along. That night my friends came by again, unplanned, casual, carrying leftovers and laughter. We ate together, talked about books and music, and how funny life can be when you finally stop waiting for people to save you. At one point, Claire raised her glass again. "To Margaret," she said, smiling. for proving that sometimes revenge isn't about destruction, it's about reconstruction. Everyone laughed, clinked glasses, and I felt it, that quiet pride, that belonging I'd chased my whole life. I looked around at their faces, all of them illuminated by the soft glow of the candles, and said, to the women who gave everything and were told it wasn't enough, to the ones who were asked to sit in the kitchen after building the whole damn house, may we never sit down again unless it's at the head of our own table. The room erupted in cheers and laughter. It wasn't a grand finale. It was better, simple, true, earned. Later that night, when the dishes were done and the candles burned low, I stood alone in the quiet again. I thought of Daniel somewhere out there, learning too late what it meant to lose the woman who had made his world possible. But I didn't feel sadness, only release. Because for the first time in 30 years, I wasn't someone's background. I wasn't a wallet or a witness. I wasn't an afterthought. I was seen. The next morning, I woke early to birdsong and sunlight pooling across my sheets. I made coffee, opened the window, and breathed in the cool air. The roses outside were blooming wild, unapologetic, bright. And as I watched them sway in the breeze, I realized something simple, something sacred. I hadn't lost a son that week. I had finally found myself. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been invisible, if you've ever given everything and been forgotten, I hope my voice reminds you that it's never too late to reclaim your place. Please like, share, and subscribe, and tell me your story in the comments. Your voice matters more than you know.